The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday morning in Seattle. Maya Chen stood behind the counter of the small cafe, watching droplets race down the window. She'd been working at this place for 3 years now, and she loved every minute of it. Sure, the pay wasn't great, and her feet hurt by the end of every shift. But something about this little coffee shop felt like home. Maya was 28 years old, and while most of her college friends were climbing corporate ladders, she was perfectly content making lattes and chatting with customers. She was also taking online classes for her linguistics degree, studying whenever she had a spare moment between orders. Her real passion was languages. Growing up in a household where her Chinese grandmother, Spanish-speaking mother, and Arabic-speaking father all lived under one roof, she'd learned early on that language was more than just words. It was connection. It was understanding. It was love. The morning rush had just ended, and Maya was wiping down the espresso machine when she heard the bell above the door chime. An elderly woman walked in, and Maya could tell right away that something was wrong. The woman looked confused, almost panicked. Her clothes were soaked from the rain, and she was clutching a smartphone in her shaking hands, staring at a map on the screen. The few customers sitting in the cafe glanced up, then quickly looked away. That's what people do when they're uncomfortable, Maya had noticed. They pretend not to see. The elderly woman approached the counter and started speaking rapidly. Maya's ears perked up immediately. She was speaking Mandarin, and from her accent, Maya could tell she was from northern China, probably Beijing. The woman's voice was getting higher and more stressed with each word. She kept pointing at her phone, then at the door, then back at her phone. A young guy sitting near the window looked annoyed. He had earbuds in and was clearly trying to work. Another customer, a woman in a business suit, glanced at the elderly lady with sympathy but didn't move from her seat. Everyone seemed to be thinking the same thing. I wish I could help, but I can't. Maya stepped out from behind the counter and switched to Mandarin without even thinking about it. Grandmother, please don't worry. Take a deep breath. I'm here to help you. The elderly woman's eyes filled with tears of relief. Someone finally understood her. Through their conversation, Maya learned that the woman's name was Mrs. Liu. She had an important medical appointment across town, but her daughter had written down the wrong address. Mrs. Liu didn't speak any English. She'd been wandering around in the rain for almost an hour, trying to find the right building. Her phone was nearly dead, and she was terrified she'd miss her appointment. Come, sit down first, Maya said gently in Mandarin, guiding Mrs. Liu to a comfortable chair by the fireplace. Let me make you some hot tea. You're shivering. She quickly prepared a cup of jasmine tea, the kind her own grandmother used to make, and brought it to Mrs. Liu along with a warm scone. This is on the house, grandmother. Don't worry about it. While Mrs. Liu sipped her tea, Maya looked at the address on her phone. She pulled out her own phone and started making calls. First, she called the medical center to explain that a patient was running late. Then she called a taxi company that she knew had Mandarin-speaking drivers. She wrote down clear directions in both Chinese and English and even drew a simple map. The whole time she kept talking to Mrs. Liu in a calm, reassuring voice, asking about her family, her daughter, how long she'd been in America. Mrs. Liu began to relax. She told Maya about her granddaughter, about her garden back in Beijing, about how scary it was to be in a place where you couldn't communicate. 20 minutes passed like nothing. When the taxi arrived, Maya walked Mrs. Liu outside under an umbrella, helped her into the car, and spoke directly to the driver in Mandarin, making absolutely sure he knew where to go. Thank you, child, Mrs. Liu said, squeezing Maya's hand. You are an angel, Maya smiled. No, grandmother. I just did what anyone should do. Please take care of yourself. As she walked back inside, shaking the rain from the umbrella, Maya didn't notice the man in the corner booth. He'd been sitting there for the past hour, and he'd watched the entire thing unfold. Alexander Novak was 53 years old. Though his silver hair and sharp blue eyes made him look distinguished rather than old, he was wearing an expensive but understated suit, and his laptop sat open in front of him, though he hadn't typed a single word in the last half hour. He'd been too busy watching Maya. This wasn't the first time either. Alexander had been coming to this cafe every morning for the past week, and every single day he'd seen something that impressed him. Yesterday, a French tourist had come in, completely lost, asking for directions to his hotel. Maya had switched to perfect French, drawn him a map, recommended a good restaurant nearby, and even called the hotel to let them know their guest was on his way. The day before that, a young Brazilian student had been sitting alone at a table crying quietly. Maya had noticed, brought over a coffee, and sat with her for 10 minutes. Alexander didn't know what they'd talked about, but they'd been speaking Portuguese, and by the end of the conversation, the girl was smiling. Then there was the Russian businessman who'd come in on Monday, frustrated because he couldn't understand the menu. Maya had switched to Russian instantly, explained every single option, made recommendations, and even taught him a few English phrases he could use at other restaurants. Alexander took a sip of his black coffee, which had long since gone cold. He was fascinated. This woman wasn't just multilingual. She was something else entirely. She had a gift for making people feel safe, understood, valued. In his 40 years in business, he'd met thousands of employees, hundreds of executives, dozens of brilliant minds, but he'd rarely met someone with this particular combination of skills and genuine compassion. He opened a file on his laptop. It contained notes he'd been keeping all week. Monday. Subject: helped Russian customer with menu. Fluent Russian, patient and kind. Took extra time. Tuesday. Subject: counseled Brazilian student in Portuguese. Showed emotional intelligence. Natural counselor. Wednesday. Subject: assisted French tourist. Perfect French accent. Went beyond job duties to help. Thursday. Subject: trained new employee. Noticed he was struggling with English. Stayed late to help him practice. And now Friday. Subject: helped elderly Chinese woman in Mandarin. Spent 20+ minutes on non-customer. Made phone calls on her behalf. No hesitation, Alexander closed the laptop. He'd seen enough. Actually, he'd seen more than enough 3 days ago. But he wanted to be absolutely certain. This decision was too important to rush. Maya returned to the counter, not knowing she'd been under observation. She started preparing for the lunch rush, restocking cups and checking the pastry case. A regular customer, an older man named Tom, who came in every day for his cappuccino, approached the counter. "That was a really nice thing you did," Tom said. "Not many people would take that kind of time." Maya shrugged, smiling. She needed help. "Besides, it's not like we're super busy right now." "Still," Tom insisted, "most people would have just shrugged and gone back to work." "You've got a good heart, kid." After Tom walked away with his cappuccino, Maya's co-worker, a 19-year-old college student named Jenny, nudged her. "Girl, you know you don't get paid extra for being a translator and a social worker, right?" Maya laughed. I know. I just can't help it. When I see someone struggling, especially with language stuff, I remember how hard it was for my parents when they first came here. If someone had helped them the way I help these people, their lives would have been so much easier." "You're too nice for your own good," Jenny said, but she was smiling. What Maya didn't know was that her entire life was about to change. The man in the corner booth, Alexander Novak, wasn't just another remote worker camping out in a cafe with his laptop. He was one of the most successful businessmen in the world. He'd built a company from absolutely nothing, growing it into a global empire worth billions of dollars. Alexander had come to Seattle for a series of meetings, but he'd also come for another reason. His company was in trouble. Not financial trouble, but something arguably worse for a business that dealt with communication. They'd lost their humanity. 6 months ago, his company had launched a marketing campaign in several countries. The translations had been technically correct, but they'd completely missed cultural nuances. The campaign had offended people in 4 different countries. The backlash was immediate and harsh. They'd lost millions of dollars. More importantly, they'd lost trust. Alexander had spent months trying to figure out what went wrong. His company employed thousands of talented people. They had the best technology. They had linguists and translators and cultural consultants. So why had they failed so badly? Then it hit him. They had experts in language, but they'd forgotten about people. They had translation, but they'd lost connection. They had words, but they'd forgotten heart. He'd told his head of human resources to find someone different. Not another corporate executive. Not another person with a perfect resume. He wanted someone who understood what his company had forgotten. That communication is about human beings, not just words. After reviewing dozens of candidates, his HR director had received an interesting tip from a friend who lived in Seattle. "There's this barista," the friend had said. "She's amazing. She speaks So Alexander had come to see for himself. And now, after a week of observation, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. The lunch rush came and went. Maya was in her element, remembering orders, joking with regulars, and making each person feel seen. Around 2 o'clock, when things finally slowed down, she allowed herself a quick break. She grabbed her textbook for her online linguistics class and sat at a small table in the back, sipping water and trying to review vocabulary. She was so focused on her studies that she didn't notice Alexander approaching until he was standing right next to her table. "Excuse me," he said. His voice had a slight accent, Eastern European maybe. "Do you mind if I sit for a moment?" Maya looked up, surprised. "Oh, sure, of course." Alexander sat down across from her. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought, but he had kind eyes. Tired eyes maybe, but kind. "I've been coming here all week," he began, "and I wanted to tell you that your kindness is really remarkable." Maya felt her cheeks flush. "Oh, thank you. That's sweet of you to say. I just like helping people, you know." "I noticed you speak Mandarin," Alexander continued, "and French, Portuguese, and Russian. That's quite impressive." She tilted her head, curious now. "Yeah, I grew up speaking a few languages at home, and then I just kept learning more. They've always come pretty naturally to me." "Are you a linguist or something?" Alexander smiled. "Something like that." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He slid it across the table. Maya picked it up and her eyes went wide. The card was simple but elegant. It read, "Alexander Novak, Chief Executive Officer, Linguitech Global." Her mouth fell open slightly. She knew that name. Everyone who studied languages knew that name. Linguitech Global was one of the biggest translation and language services companies in the world. They worked with governments, corporations, international organizations. And this man sitting in her little cafe in his perfectly tailored suit was the CEO. Wait, you're... Maya couldn't quite form the words. "I'd like to offer you a job," Alexander said simply. Maya stared at the business card in her hand like it might disappear if she blinked. "Alexander Novak, CEO of Linguitech Global." She looked up at him, then back at the card, then up at him again. "You want to offer me a job?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like at your company?" Alexander nodded, a slight smile on his face. "Yes, a very specific position, actually. I need someone who can do what you do naturally every single day. Someone who doesn't just translate words, but who understands people." Maya let out a nervous laugh. "Mr. Novak, I appreciate this, I really do, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm a barista. I make coffee. I mean, sure, I speak a few languages, but I don't have any corporate experience. I've never worked in an office. I don't even own a proper business suit." "Good," Alexander said, and this surprised her. "I don't want someone from the corporate world. I have plenty of those people already. What I need is someone who knows how to connect with human beings across cultures. Someone with emotional intelligence and genuine compassion. Those things can't be taught in business school." He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious now. "I've watched you all week. You helped that Russian businessman on Monday. You sat with that crying student on Tuesday. You spent your own time training that new employee who was struggling. And today you spent 20 minutes helping an elderly woman who couldn't speak English. And you didn't think twice about it. You just did it because it was the right thing to do." Maya felt her face getting hot. She hadn't realized anyone was paying that much attention. "I mean, those were just normal things. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Alexander said firmly. "They wouldn't. Most people would have pointed to Google Translate on their phone and gone back to work. You treated each of those people like they mattered. Like their problems were worth your time and energy. That's exactly what my company needs to learn how to do again." He explained that he wanted to create a new position called Cultural Liaison Director. The job would involve traveling to Linguitech's offices around the world, training teams on authentic cross-cultural communication. Not just the mechanics of language, but the heart of it, how to make people feel understood and valued. The salary would be $140,000 a year to start, Alexander said, plus travel expenses, full benefits, and housing assistance if you need to relocate. Maya's jaw dropped. She was currently making $32,000 a year at the cafe. This was more than 4 times that amount. Her mind immediately started racing. She could pay off her student loans, help her parents with their mortgage, actually save money for the first time in her adult life. But then reality crashed back in. Mr. Novak, this is incredibly generous, but I don't think I'm qualified. I'm still finishing my degree. I've never trained anyone on anything except how to make a latte. What if I mess up? What if I'm not what you think I am? Alexander smiled, and for the first time she saw something warm and almost fatherly in his expression. You know what I was doing when I was your age? I was cleaning office buildings at night. I'd come to this country from Ukraine with almost nothing, speaking maybe 20 words of English. I worked as a janitor for 3 years while I taught myself programming and studied languages during the day. Everyone told me I wasn't qualified to run a tech company, but I understood something that people with fancy degrees didn't. I understood what it felt like to be the outsider, to struggle with communication, to need help and not know how to ask for it. He tapped the table with his finger for emphasis. That empathy, that understanding, it became the foundation of my business. But somewhere along the way, as the company grew, we lost that. We became just another corporation chasing profits, and it nearly destroyed everything I built. You have what we lost. That's why I need you. Maya sat there in stunned silence. Her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears and excitement and doubt all at once. Can I think about it? She finally asked. Of course, Alexander said. He pulled out another card and wrote a phone number on the back. This is my personal cell. Take a few days. Call me when you've decided. He stood up, picked up his laptop bag, and then paused. One more thing. Don't think about whether you're qualified. Think about whether this is something you want to do. If you want it, you'll figure out how to do it. That's how life works. After he left, Maya sat there for another 10 minutes just staring at the business card. Jenny came over and sat down across from her. Okay, what was that about? That guy looked important. Maya showed her the card. Jenny's eyes went huge. Wait, the Linguatech? The billion-dollar company? And he just offered you a job? I think so. I'm not totally sure if I'm awake right now or if this is some kind of weird dream. Jenny grabbed her arm. Girl, if you don't take this job, I'm going to personally drag you to therapy because you've lost your mind. Do you know how much money that company has? You could change your whole life. But Maya wasn't so sure. That night after her shift ended, she walked home through the rainy streets thinking about everything. She loved working at the cafe. She loved her regulars, loved the rhythm of the work, loved being part of the neighborhood. What if she took this fancy job and hated it? What if she wasn't any good at it? What if she let this man down after he'd put so much faith in her? She called her mom when she got home. After explaining everything, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Mia, her mother finally said, do you remember when your father and I first came to this country? We were so lost. Everything was confusing and scary. And do you remember Mrs. Patterson? Maya did remember. Mrs. Patterson was their elderly neighbor who had taken it upon herself to help Maya's parents learn English. She'd spent hours with them every week, teaching them not just words but how things worked in America, how to navigate the school system, how to talk to doctors, how to advocate for themselves. Mrs. Patterson didn't have to help us, her mother continued. She was retired. She had her own life. But she saw people who needed help and she helped them. She changed our lives, Maya. And now you have a chance to be Mrs. Patterson for thousands of people. How can you say no to that? Her mother was right, but Maya still felt scared. The next day at work, she was distracted. She messed up orders, forgot to restock the milk, and nearly burned herself on the espresso machine. Her boss, Mr. Kim, noticed. You okay, Maya? You seem like you're on another planet today. She told him about the job offer. Mr. Kim whistled low. That's amazing. You should definitely take it. But what about here? You need me. The customers know me. Mr. Kim shook his head, smiling. Maya, you're 28 years old. You can't stay a barista forever just because you're comfortable. I'll be honest with you. When I was your age, I had a chance to go to culinary school in Paris. Free tuition, everything paid for. But I was scared. I said no. I stayed at my regular job at a restaurant here. And you know what? I've regretted it every single day for 30 years. Don't be like me. Take the risk. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She pulled out her laptop and started researching Alexander Novak. What she found amazed her. He really had come from nothing. There were articles about his journey from janitor to billionaire. He'd built Linguatech from his tiny apartment. But what really caught her attention was an interview from about 6 months ago. The interviewer asked him about a recent controversy where Linguatech had launched a marketing campaign that had offended people in several countries. Alexander looked genuinely pained in the video. "We failed," he said simply. "We had all the technical expertise, but we forgot the human element. We translated words but lost meaning. We focused on efficiency and forgot about empathy." It was a harsh reminder that in business, especially in communication, you can't just rely on technology and processes. You need heart. You need people who understand people, and we lost that somewhere along the way. I take full responsibility and we're working hard to fix it. Maya watched the video 3 times. This man wasn't just offering her a job. He was trying to fix something that was broken in his company, and he thought she could help. That felt important. That felt meaningful. On the 3rd night, she made her decision. She called the number Alexander had written on the card. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Mr. Novak, this is Maya, from the cafe." "I remember," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Have you made a decision?" "Yes, I want to take the job. But I have one condition." There was a pause. "Go ahead. I want to keep working at the cafe 1 day a week. These people, my regulars, the neighborhood, they're not just customers to me. They're my community. I don't want to completely lose that connection. I know it might seem unprofessional or whatever, but it's important to me." Alexander laughed, a genuine warm laugh. "Maya, that response tells me everything I need to know. I made the right choice." "Yes, absolutely. Keep your cafe day. In fact, I insist on it. If you lose touch with what makes you special, you won't be any good to me anyway." "Deal? Deal," Maya said. And suddenly she was smiling so wide her face hurt. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Alexander had his HR team contact her with all the paperwork. The salary he'd mentioned was real. The benefits were incredible. She'd have her own company credit card for travel expenses. They'd pay for her to finish her degree. They even offered to help her find a nicer apartment if she wanted. Maya gave her notice at the cafe, and Mr. Kim threw her a little goodbye party. All the regulars came. Tom brought a card signed by dozens of people. The Russian businessman she'd helped weeks ago came back just to thank her and wish her well. Even the Brazilian student she'd comforted showed up with flowers. "You made this place special," Tom said, raising his coffee cup in a toast. "Don't forget about us when you're traveling the world." "I could never forget you guys," Maya said, wiping away tears. "This place made me who I am." Jenny hugged her tight. "You better text me from every country you visit, and bring me back something cool from Japan or wherever." The night before her first day at Linguatech, Maya laid out the one semi-professional outfit she owned. It was a simple black dress and a blazer she'd bought for her college graduation. She'd need to buy real work clothes now, she realized. That felt surreal. She thought about Alexander's story, about how he'd come to America with nothing and built an empire. She thought about Mrs. Patterson helping her parents. She thought about the elderly Chinese woman, Mrs. Liu, and how scared she'd been that rainy morning. She thought about all the times in her life when someone had helped her, shown her kindness, made her feel less alone in the world. Maybe her mom was right. Maybe this was her chance to be that person for others on a bigger scale. She'd spent 3 years making coffee and making people feel welcome in a small cafe. Now she was about to try to do the same thing for a company that operated in 72 countries. It was terrifying. It was exciting. It was probably crazy, but then again, the best things in life usually are. She set her alarm, turned off the light, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow her whole life would change. She just hoped she was ready for it. More importantly, she hoped Alexander was right about her. She hoped she really did have something special to offer. Because if she didn't, she was about to make a very expensive mistake. But somewhere deep down, underneath all the fear and doubt, there was a small voice telling her she could do this. The same voice that had told her to learn Arabic when everyone said it was too hard. The same voice that had told her to help Mrs. Liu even though she was busy. The same voice that had always pushed her to choose kindness over convenience. That voice had never steered her wrong before. Maybe it was time to trust it again. Maya's first day at Linguatech Global was nothing like she'd imagined. The headquarters building in downtown Seattle was 37 floors of glass and steel. She'd walked past it hundreds of times but never thought she'd actually work there. The lobby alone was bigger than the entire cafe where she'd spent the last 3 years. A friendly woman from HR met her at the reception desk. Her name was Patricia, and she had kind eyes that reminded Maya of a teacher she'd loved in elementary school. "Welcome to Linguatech. We're so excited to have you here. Mr. Novak has told everyone about you." "He has?" Maya felt her stomach flip. What exactly did he say? Patricia smiled as they walked to the elevator. That you're going to help us remember what we're really here to do. He's been talking about culture and connection nonstop since he met you. It's actually been really refreshing. The office on the 23rd floor was open and modern, with people working at standing desks and having meetings in glass-walled conference rooms. Everyone looked busy and important. Maya suddenly felt very aware of her department store blazer and the fact that she'd never worked in an office before. Alexander met her personally and gave her a tour. He introduced her to what felt like 100 people whose names she immediately forgot. Everyone was polite, but she could see the curiosity in their eyes. Who was this random woman their CEO had hired? Why had he created a whole new position just for her? Her office was small but had a window with a view of the city. There was a new laptop on the desk, a company phone, and a welcome basket with snacks and a coffee mug that said, "Communication is connection." Maya sat in her chair and spun around once, feeling completely out of place. Alexander knocked on her open door. "How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Maya admitted. "Everyone here seems so smart and professional. I keep waiting for someone to realize you made a mistake hiring me." He sat down in the chair across from her desk. "You know what the difference is between you and everyone else in this building? They know how to do business. You know how to do humanity. Trust me, we need the second one more than we realize." Over the next few weeks, Maya learned the basics of office life, how to use the company software, how to schedule meetings, how to write professional emails. But the real work began when Alexander sent her to their Tokyo office for her first training assignment. The flight to Japan was 14 hours, and Maya had never been on a plane that long before. She barely slept, too nervous about what she was about to do. When she arrived in Tokyo, jet-lagged and exhausted, she was met by the office manager, a Japanese man named Kenji who spoke perfect English with a British accent. "We're very curious to meet you," Kenji said as they drove from the airport. "Mr. Novak said you're going to teach us about cultural communication, but we already have translators and cultural consultants. So we're wondering what exactly you're here to do." Maya heard the skepticism in his voice. Great, she thought. They think I'm a waste of time. The Tokyo office was smaller than headquarters, but still impressive. About 40 people worked there, handling translations and localization for Japanese clients. When Maya walked into the conference room for her first session, she could feel the polite but distant energy. These people were professionals. They knew their jobs. What could a former barista possibly teach them? Maya had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but standing there in front of all those expectant faces, she suddenly knew that wasn't going to work. So she closed her laptop. "Okay, forget what I was going to say," she began. "I'm going to tell you a story instead. 3 months ago, I was working at a small cafe in Seattle. An elderly Chinese woman came in completely lost and panicked. She had a medical appointment but didn't speak English. Everyone in the cafe could see she needed help, but nobody did anything. You know why? Because helping her would be inconvenient. It would take time away from their work, their coffee, their own problems." She looked around the room. People were listening now, leaning forward slightly. "I helped her because I speak Mandarin, but that's not really why I helped her. I helped her because I saw a human being who was scared and alone. The language part was just a tool. The real communication was in showing her that she mattered, that someone cared, that she wasn't invisible." Maya walked around the conference table, making eye contact with different people. "I know you're all excellent at your jobs. I've seen your work. The translations are technically perfect. But I want to ask you something. When was the last time you thought about the actual human being who's going to read what you translate? Not the client paying the bill. The real person at the end of the chain." A young woman near the back raised her hand tentatively. Her name tag said Yuki. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "We had a situation last month," Yuki said quietly. "We were translating marketing materials for a pharmaceutical company. The English version talked about side effects in a very casual way. But in Japanese culture, we take medical information much more seriously. I wanted to adjust the tone to be more respectful, but my supervisor said we needed to translate it exactly as written. The client complained that our version seemed too formal and serious. I felt like we were caught in the middle." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," Maya said. "You saw something that needed cultural adjustment, but you were told to just translate the words. What happened? The campaign didn't do well in Japan, Yuki admitted. People found it disrespectful, like the company didn't take their health concerns seriously. Maya turned to address the whole room. That's the problem right there. You have the knowledge. Yuki knew exactly what needed to be changed. But somewhere along the way, this company started treating you like machines that just convert words from one language to another. That's not what you are. You're cultural bridges. You're the people who help ideas cross from one world to another. But you've been told to just follow the rules and not use your judgment. She spent the next 3 hours working with the team, not teaching them language skills they already had, but helping them understand their value. She had them do exercises where they practiced explaining cultural concerns to clients. She role-played difficult conversations. She taught them how to advocate for the end user, not just satisfy the person signing the check. By the end of the session, the energy in the room had completely changed. Kenji, who had been skeptical at first, came up to her afterwards. "I've been doing this work for 15 years, he said, and I've been feeling more and more like just a cog in a machine. Today was the first time in a long time that I remembered why I got into this field in the first place. Thank you." But Maya's success in Tokyo was just the beginning. Her next assignment was the Dubai office, and that's where things got really challenging. The Dubai team was split between Western expatriates and local Arab staff, and the tension was obvious from the moment Maya walked in. The expats worked on one side of the office, the Arab staff on the other. They barely spoke to each other except when absolutely necessary. The office director, a British man named Trevor, explained the situation over coffee. "It's been like this for 2 years. The local staff thinks the expats are disrespectful and culturally insensitive. The expats think the local staff is overly sensitive and difficult to work with. Productivity is down. People are miserable. Mr. Novak sent you here because he thinks you can fix it, but honestly, I'm not sure anyone can." Maya spent her first few days just observing and talking to people individually. She drank tea with the Arab staff and heard their frustrations about how the expats would schedule meetings during prayer times, how they spoke too directly in a culture that valued indirect communication, how they seemed to think their way of doing things was automatically better. She had lunch with the expats and heard their side. They felt like they had to walk on eggshells, that any mistake was seen as offensive, that they were trying their best but nothing seemed good enough. Everyone was frustrated. Everyone felt misunderstood. Nobody was actually talking to each other about the real issues. Maya decided to do something risky. She organized a mandatory half-day workshop where everyone had to participate. She knew some people would be angry about losing work time, but she didn't care. This was more important. She split people into mixed groups, expats and locals together. Then she gave them a simple assignment. Tell the person next to you about a time when you felt disrespected or misunderstood in your life. Not at work. Just in life. The room was silent at first. People looked uncomfortable. But slowly conversations started. Maya walked around listening. A British woman talked about being the only girl in her engineering program and how professors ignored her ideas. A Syrian man talked about moving to Dubai and how people assumed he wasn't educated because of his accent. An American guy talked about being dyslexic and how teachers made him feel stupid as a kid. After 20 minutes, Maya asked people to share what they'd learned. A young Emirati woman named Fatima raised her hand. "I just talked to David," she said, pointing to one of the expats. "I've worked with him for a year and I thought he was just rude and dismissive. But he told me about growing up with ADHD and how he learned to communicate really directly. Because subtle cues were hard for him. He's not trying to be disrespectful. That's just how his brain works." "I never knew that," David nodded, looking emotional. "And I didn't know that Fatima's directness is actually considered rude in her culture. She's been trying to be respectful by being indirect, and I've been getting frustrated thinking she wasn't being clear. We were both trying to be considerate in our own ways and just missing each other completely." That moment broke something open. People started talking, really talking. They discovered that most of their conflicts came from assumptions and misunderstandings, not actual malice. The expats weren't trying to be disrespectful. The local staff wasn't trying to be difficult. They were just operating from different cultural frameworks and nobody had helped them find common ground. Maya spent 2 more days working with the team, establishing new practices. They created a shared calendar that marked prayer time so meetings wouldn't be scheduled then. They developed a communication guide that explained cultural differences without judging them. They set up a buddy system where each expat was paired with a local colleague to help navigate cultural questions. By the time Maya left Dubai, the office felt different. People were smiling more. They were eating lunch together. They were asking each other questions instead of making assumptions. Trevor walked her to the airport. "I don't know how you did that," he said. "We've had consultants come through here before. They gave us presentations and training modules and nothing changed. But you actually got through to people." Maya shrugged. "I didn't do anything magical. I just helped them see each other as human beings instead of obstacles. Once they understood where each other was coming from, they could figure out the rest themselves." But her next assignment was going to be her toughest yet. The Berlin office had requested her specifically after hearing about her work in Dubai. But when she arrived in Germany and met with the team, she realized this was a completely different kind of problem. The Berlin staff wasn't fighting with each other. They were fighting with headquarters. "We feel like Seattle treats us like children," one of the senior translators told her bluntly. "Every decision has to go through them. They don't trust us to know our own market. They send us these American-style marketing materials and tell us to just translate them, even when we know they won't work in Europe. We're professionals, but they treat us like we're just workers on an assembly line." Maya listened to complaint after complaint. The Berlin team felt micromanaged, undervalued, and frustrated. And honestly, after hearing their stories, Maya agreed with them. Headquarters was treating them exactly the way they'd treated the Tokyo and Dubai teams, like translation machines instead of cultural experts. That night in her hotel room, Maya realized something important. The problem wasn't just in the individual offices. The problem was systemic. Linguatech had grown so fast and become so focused on efficiency that they'd lost sight of the human expertise in their own company. They had brilliant people all over the world, but nobody was listening to them. She picked up her phone and called Alexander. It was 3 a.m. in Seattle, but he answered anyway. "We need to talk," Maya said. "I found the real problem, and it's bigger than I thought." Alexander listened quietly as Maya explained everything she'd discovered over the past 3 months. She told him about the brilliant translators in Tokyo who were afraid to speak up, about the Dubai team that had been divided because nobody helped them understand each other, about the Berlin staff who felt like their expertise was being ignored. "The problem isn't in those offices," Maya said, pacing around her hotel room in Berlin. "The problem is that headquarters doesn't trust them. We hire experts all over the world, and then treat them like they're just worker bees following orders. We've built a system that kills exactly the kind of thinking we need." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Maya worried she'd overstepped. After all, she'd only been with the company for 3 months. Who was she to criticize how a billion-dollar corporation operated? Finally, Alexander spoke. "You're absolutely right. And I've been part of the problem. When the company was small, I knew everyone personally. I trusted them. But as we grew, I got scared. I thought the only way to maintain quality was through control. I created the very thing I was trying to prevent." "So what do we do?" Maya asked. "You're going to present your findings to the board of directors next month in London," Alexander said. "And then we're going to change how this company operates." Maya's stomach dropped. "The board of directors? Alexander, I can't do that. These are serious business people. They're going to ask me questions I can't answer. I don't know about profit margins and quarterly reports and all that stuff." "Good," Alexander said, "because that's not what I need you to talk about. I need you to tell them exactly what you told me, that we're wasting the human potential we've hired, that control is killing creativity, that we need to trust our people." "Can you do that?" Maya took a deep breath. "I can try." The next 3 weeks were the most stressful of Maya's life. She worked with teams across the company to document the problems and gather evidence. She talked to employees in 12 different countries. She collected stories and data and examples. And slowly, a picture emerged of a company that had lost its way. She also kept her promise to work at the cafe 1 day a week. Every Wednesday, she'd put on her apron and go back to making lattes and chatting with regulars. It kept her grounded. It reminded her of who she was and why Alexander had hired her in the first place. One Wednesday, a college student came in looking stressed about an exam. Maya made her a free coffee and talked to her for a few minutes about test anxiety. It was a small thing, barely 5 minutes out of her day, but the girl left smiling and Maya remembered. This was what mattered. Individual human moments, not spreadsheets or presentations or corporate strategy. People. When she flew to London for the board meeting, she carried that thought with her like armor. The Linguatech boardroom was intimidating. A massive table, leather chairs, and 12 very serious-looking people in expensive suits. They were investors, former executives, and business leaders who had decades of experience between them. And then there was Maya, a 28-year-old former barista who'd been with the company for less than 4 months. Alexander introduced her simply. This is Maya Chen, our cultural liaison director. She's going to share what she's learned from visiting our global offices. Maya stood up, her hands shaking slightly. She'd prepared a whole PowerPoint presentation with graphs and statistics. But looking at these stern faces, she remembered what Alexander had told her. Don't try to be something you're not. So she closed her laptop, just like she'd done in Tokyo. I'm going to tell you about 3 people, she began. First, there's Yuki in our Tokyo office. She's been a translator for 7 years. Last year, she noticed that a pharmaceutical client's marketing material would be offensive in Japanese culture. She wanted to adjust it, but her supervisor told her to translate it exactly as written. The campaign failed. The client was unhappy and we lost the account. Yuki knew what would happen, but nobody listened to her. She saw a few board members glance at each other. Then there's Fatima in Dubai. She's Emirati, brilliant, and she's worked for us for 3 years. She was struggling to communicate with Western colleagues not because she couldn't speak English, but because she was trying to be culturally respectful in ways they didn't understand. They thought she was being unclear. She thought they were being rude. Nobody helped them bridge that gap until I showed up. We were wasting her talent by letting her spend energy on conflict instead of work. Maya walked around the table now, making eye contact with each board member. And finally, there's Klaus in Berlin. He's a senior translator who knows the European market better than anyone, but every decision he makes has to be approved by someone in Seattle who's never lived in Europe. Klaus is an expert. We hired him to be an expert, but then we tell him he can't be trusted to make expert decisions. So why did we hire him? One of the board members, a woman with sharp eyes and gray hair, leaned forward. Ms. Chen, these are touching stories, but what's your point? Every company needs oversight and quality control. My point, Maya said, is that we're not using oversight for quality control. We're using it because we're scared. We're scared that if we let people make decisions, they'll make mistakes. And sometimes they will. But right now, we're making bigger mistakes by not letting them use their judgment. Another board member, an older man with glasses, spoke up. With all due respect, you've been here for 3 months. How can you possibly understand the complexities of running a global corporation? Maya felt her face get hot, but she didn't back down. You're right. I don't understand corporate complexity, but I understand people. And I've spent 3 months talking to your employees all over the world. Do you know what I keep hearing? That they feel like their expertise doesn't matter. That they're treated like machines. That they used to love this work, but now they're just going through the motions. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes. Here are some numbers. In offices where I've implemented new practices, where we've given teams more autonomy and trusted their cultural expertise, employee satisfaction has increased by 42% in just 2 months. Client complaints have dropped by 37%. And we've actually won 3 major contracts because clients specifically mentioned that our renewed focus on cultural understanding impressed them. The room went quiet. The woman with sharp eyes smiled slightly. Those are significant numbers. They are, Maya agreed. But here's what matters more. I talked to a translator in Singapore last week. She told me she was planning to quit. She had another job offer, better pay, everything. But after our training session, she changed her mind. She said for the first time in 2 years, she felt like her work actually meant something. That's what we're losing when we don't trust our people. Not just efficiency. We're losing the human heart of what we do. Another board member raised his hand. Let's say we agree with you. What exactly are you proposing we do differently? Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been preparing for. 3 things. First, we restructured decision-making authority. Regional offices should have the power to make cultural and linguistic decisions without waiting for approval from headquarters. We hired experts. Let them be experts, she held up a second finger. Second, we change how we measure success. Right now, we measure how fast we complete projects and how cheap we can do them. We need to also measure cultural appropriateness and client satisfaction over time. not just whether they signed the contract. A third finger went up. And finally, we invest in ongoing cultural training. Not just teaching people languages, but teaching them how to navigate cultural differences with respect and curiosity. We become the company that doesn't just translate words, but builds bridges between cultures. The board members looked at each other. Some seemed skeptical. Others seemed interested. The sharp-eyed woman spoke again. Ms. Chen, your passion is evident, but implementing these changes would require significant investment and organizational restructuring. Do you have any idea how complicated that would be? Before Maya could answer, Alexander stood up. It would be very complicated. It would also be necessary. 6 months ago, we nearly destroyed this company's reputation because we forgot what we're supposed to be doing. We're not a translation factory. We're a bridge between cultures. Maya has reminded us of that. More importantly, she's shown us that it works. He looked around the table at each board member. I built this company from nothing because I understood what it felt like to struggle with communication in a foreign place. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I got caught up in growth and profit margins and efficiency, but none of that matters if we've lost the soul of what we do. Maya is offering us a chance to find it again. I think we should take it. The debate went on for another 2 hours. Maya answered questions, defended her proposals, and tried not to let her nervousness show. Finally, the board called for a vote. 8 members voted yes, 3 voted no, 1 abstained. The proposal passed. As people filed out of the room, the sharp-eyed woman approached Maya. I voted yes, but I want you to know I'm going to be watching these results very carefully. If employee satisfaction goes up but profits go down, we'll revisit this decision. Fair enough, Maya said. But I think you'll find that when people feel valued and trusted, they do better work. Better work means happier clients. Happier clients means more business. It all connects. The woman smiled. I hope you're right. By the way, I looked into your background. Coffee shop barista to cultural liaison director in a Fortune 500 company. That's quite a jump. I'm still a barista, Maya said. 1 day a week. It keeps me honest. That night, Alexander took Maya to dinner at a nice restaurant in London. She was exhausted but also exhilarated. They'd actually done it. The company was going to change. You know what impressed me most today? Alexander said as they waited for their food. You didn't try to be someone you're not. You didn't put on a corporate mask or use business jargon to sound smart. You just told them the truth in your own words. That takes courage, Maya shrugged. I figured if they didn't like the real me, then this wasn't the right job anyway. That's exactly why it is the right job, Alexander said. You know, when I was building this company, I used to think success meant becoming like all the other big corporations. Professional, serious, impersonal. I thought that's what it meant to be legitimate. But you've shown me that our strength is in being different, in caring about things that other companies think are soft or unimportant.